highway was empty when I pulled into the cracked parking lot, headlights sweeping over faded stripes and a neon sign that buzzed like a dying insect. The Blue Lantern Motel looked even lonelier in person than it had in the job listing. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, watching the wind push tumbleweeds across the asphalt. My phone had no signal. I told myself that was normal out here, but it still made my skin prickle. I needed this job, rent was overdue, and my last paycheck was already gone. Still, as I stepped out into the cold, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something I didn't understand. The front office was lit by a single flickering bulb. Inside, a man in a wrinkled uniform was stuffing papers into a backpack. He barely looked at me. "You the new night clerk?" I nodded, and he shoved a battered folder into my hands. "Just follow the rules. All of them. No matter what." His voice was flat, but his eyes darted to the window as if he expected something to be watching. "What kind of rules?" I asked, but he was already halfway out the door. "You'll see," he muttered, and then he was gone, the car peeling out onto the highway. I stood alone in the office, clutching the folder. The silence pressed in, broken only by the hum of the vending machine and the distant howl of wind. I glanced at the list inside, the words blurring together. 10 rules, some crossed out, others underlined. My heart thudded. If I'd known what was waiting for me behind room 12's door, I might have run too. But I needed this job. I took a breath and stepped toward the manager's office, folder in hand. The manager's office was tucked behind a battered door marked "Staff Only." I knocked, and after a moment, it creaked open to reveal a woman in her late 50s, hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp and tired. She didn't smile. "You must be the new night clerk," she said, voice low and steady. "Come in, close the door behind you." I obeyed, feeling the weight of her gaze as I stepped inside. The room was cramped, walls lined with old ledgers and faded photographs of the motel and better days. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. "Sit." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. The handwriting was neat, but the paper was worn, corners curled and stained with coffee. "These are the rules," she said. "If you follow them, you'll be fine. Break them, and you might not make it to sunrise." I tried to smile, but she didn't return it. "I'm serious. Read them." I looked down at the list. Never check in a guest who arrives barefoot, no matter how much they beg. If a guest in room 7 calls after 2 a.m., do not answer. Let it ring. Never give out the Wi-Fi password after midnight. If you see a child alone in the parking lot, do not approach. Lock the doors. Room 12 must remain vacant. If someone asks for it, tell them it's under renovation. If a guest asks for extra towels more than twice, refuse politely and alert me. Do not enter the laundry room between 3:13 and 3:33 a.m. If you hear knocking from the vending machine alcove, ignore it. Never rent to families with an odd number of children. If you find a key on the front desk that you didn't place there, throw it in the dumpster out back, immediately. I looked up, half expecting her to laugh, but her face was stone. "You're not joking," I said. She shook her head. "I wish I was. These rules aren't for show. They're for your safety and for everyone else's." I tried to ask about the barefoot guests, about room 12, but she cut me off. "Don't ask questions. Don't try to make sense of it. Just do what the list says. That's how you get through the night." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've seen what happens when people get curious, when they think the rules are just old superstitions. The last clerk thought he could handle it. He lasted 3 nights. She tapped the list. "You want to last longer? Follow every rule. No exceptions." I swallowed, the paper trembling in my hands. "What if I mess up?" She shrugged, a tired gesture. "Then you hope it's a small mistake. Some rules are more forgiving than others, but some aren't." She stood, signaling the end of the conversation.
Your shift starts now. The logbook's at the front desk. I'll be in the apartment upstairs if you need me, but don't call unless it's an emergency. And remember, never open the door for anyone who says they're me. I won't come down during the night." I stood, clutching the list, my mind racing. The rules seemed ridiculous, but the fear in her eyes was real. I wanted to ask more, to demand an explanation, but something in her expression told me I wouldn't get one. "Good luck," she said, already turning away, "and welcome to the Blue Lantern." I stepped back into the empty lobby, the list heavy in my hand. The clock above the desk ticked past 10 p.m. My first shift had begun, and the rules were all I had. I took my place behind the front desk, the list of rules tucked into my shirt pocket, its edges digging into my chest every time I moved. The lobby was small, with a faded carpet and a dusky potted plant that looked like it hadn't been watered in weeks. I found the logbook, a thick binder with years of cramped handwriting, and flipped to a fresh page. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I wrote my name and the date, the first entry of my first night. The motel was quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound seem louder. I tried to focus on the routine, checking the reservation list, counting the cash in the drawer, making sure the coffee pot was full. The tasks were simple, familiar, but my nerves buzzed with every creak and groan of the old building. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. A car pulled in around 10:30, headlights sweeping across the lobby windows. I straightened my uniform and tried to look confident as a middle-aged couple came in, road-weary and polite.
They signed the register, took their key, and disappeared down the hallway without a word about the rules or the strange atmosphere. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that everything was normal, that the list was just a weird tradition, a way to haze the new guy. But then I noticed a dark stain on the carpet near the vending machines, a shape that looked almost like a handprint. I bent down to touch it, but it was dry. The color faded into the fibers. I told myself it was just a spilled soda, but the unease lingered.
Rule number 1. Never check in a guest who arrives barefoot, no matter how much they beg. I tried to remember if it was the first or third rule, but the words echoed in my mind all the same. He approached the desk, smiling politely. "Evening. You got any rooms left?" His voice was calm, almost friendly, but something about it made my skin prickle. I forced a smile, glancing at the reservation book. "We're pretty full tonight," I said, stalling for time. "Where are your shoes?" He shrugged, as if it was nothing. "Lost them at a rest stop. Long story. I just need a place to crash for a few hours." He slid a credit card across the counter, his fingers long and thin. I hesitated, the list of rules burning in my pocket. The manager's warning echoed in my ears. Break a rule, and you might not make it to sunrise. I looked at his feet again. They were perfectly still, toes splayed slightly on the tile. No dirt, no cuts, not even a mark from the gravel outside. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't check in guests without proper footwear. It's, policy. Health code." His smile faded. "Come on, man. I've been driving all night. I'll pay double. I just need a room." He leaned in, his eyes catching the fluorescent light in a way that made them look almost silver. "No one else has to know." I felt a strange pressure in my chest, like the air was getting thinner. For a moment, I almost gave in. The motel was empty, the night was cold, and he seemed harmless enough. But then I remembered the manager's face, the fear in her eyes. I shook my head. "I'm sorry. I can't help you." His expression didn't change, but something in the room did. The air grew colder. The lights flickered. He straightened, his smile returning, but now it was too wide, stretching his face in a way that didn't look right. "Suit yourself," he said softly.
He turned and walked toward the door, his bare feet making no sound on the tile. I watched, heart pounding, as he reached the threshold. For a split second, he paused and looked back at me. His eyes were empty, like the headlights of a car in the fog. Then he stepped outside. I rushed to the window, peering out into the parking lot. The gravel should have been sharp, freezing. But he didn't flinch. He walked across the lot, leaving no footprints, no sign he'd ever been there. As he reached the edge of the property, he seemed to blur, his outline flickering like a bad signal. Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I stood frozen behind the desk, the list of rules clutched in my fist. My skepticism cracked, replaced by a cold, creeping fear. I almost let him in. I almost broke the rule. I still see what was under his skin when I close my eyes, the way his smile stretched, the emptiness in his eyes, the way he vanished without a trace. The motel was silent again, but the quiet felt different now, heavier. I sat down, hands shaking, and read the rules again, this time with a new respect. The line between normal and nightmare had shifted, and I was no longer sure which side I was on. I knew only one thing for certain. The rules were real, and I would follow them, no matter what. The rest of the motel seemed to hold its breath after the barefoot man vanished. I tried to steady myself, telling myself it was just exhaustion, that I'd imagined the way he faded into the dark. But the rules felt heavier in my pocket now, and every time I glanced at the clock, I found myself counting down the minutes until sunrise. At 2:07 a.m., the phone on the desk rang, its shrill tones slicing through the silence. I jumped, heart pounding, and picked up the receiver. Static crackled on the line. Then a voice, soft, almost apologetic. "Front desk? This is room 7. I'm so sorry to bother you, but could I get some extra towels? I spilled something and..." She paused, and I heard a faint wet sound in the background, like water dripping onto tile.
It's a bit of a mess. I glanced at the rules. Rule number 5. Never enter room 7 after 2 a.m. I checked the clock again. 2:08. My mind raced. Maybe I could just leave the towels outside the door. Maybe that would be enough. "I can leave some outside your room," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not supposed to go in after hours." There was a long pause. The wet sound grew louder, and I thought I heard something else. A low, gurgling whisper, just at the edge of hearing. "Please," the woman said, her voice suddenly strained. "I can't open the door. You'll have to come in. It's important." The line crackled, and for a moment I thought I heard my own name, spoken in that same apologetic tone. I gripped the receiver, knuckles white. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't do that. I'll leave the towels outside." I hung up before she could answer, my hands shaking. I grabbed a stack of towels from the supply closet and walked down the hallway, every step echoing in the empty corridor. The door to room 7 was closed, the number slightly askew. I placed the towels on the floor, careful not to touch the door, and hurried back to the lobby. As I reached the desk, the phone rang again. I hesitated, then picked up. "Front desk?" This time, the voice was different, deeper, more insistent. "This is the corporate inspector. I need the Wi-Fi password for a compliance check." I blinked, caught off guard. "Rule number 8. Never give out the Wi-Fi password after midnight." "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give that out right now. It's a policy." The voice grew colder. "You don't want to lose your job, do you? I can have you replaced by morning. Just give me the password." I swallowed, the memory of the barefoot man still fresh in my mind. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't help you." The line went dead, replaced by a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. I set the phone down, heart racing. The rules were being tested.
one after another, and each time I followed them, the motel seemed to grow darker, the air heavier. I tried to distract myself with paperwork, but my eyes kept drifting to the security monitor. The screen flickered, showing static, then a brief image of the parking lot, empty except for a shadow that seemed to move on its own. At 2:45, the phone rang again. Front desk? Silence. Then a child's voice, soft and trembling. I'm lost. Can you help me? I froze, remembering rule number 4. If you see a child alone in the parking lot, do not approach. Lock the doors. I stood, peering out the window. Sure enough, a small figure stood by the edge of the lot, just outside the pool of light from the sign. I locked the doors, heart pounding, and turned away from the glass. The phone rang again and again, each time a different voice, each time a new request that pressed against the rules. A man asking for room 12, a woman begging for a key she'd left at the desk, a family with 3 children, their faces blurred on the security monitor, asking for a room. Each time, I clung to the rules, refusing, apologizing, doing whatever it took to avoid breaking them. Logic told me it was impossible, that these were just prank calls, tricks of the light, my mind playing games in the dead of night. But the fear was real, a cold knot in my stomach that grew tighter with each test. The rules weren't just guidelines, they were the only thing keeping me safe. By 3 a.m., I was exhausted, nerves frayed, every muscle tense. The motel was silent again, but I knew it was only a matter of time before the next rule was tested. I no longer doubted. The impossible was real, and the only way to survive was to follow the rules, no matter how strange or cruel they seemed. The clock read 3:27 a.m. when the pounding started. Not the polite tap of a late arrival, but frantic, desperate fists slamming against the glass. I jumped, nearly spilling my coffee, and hurried to the front desk window. Outside, a minivan idled in the lot, headlights cutting through the darkness. A woman stood at the door, her face streaked with tears, clutching a small child to her chest. Behind her, a man paced, running his hands through his hair, and 2 more children huddled together, wide-eyed and shivering. I hesitated, the rules echoing in my mind. Never rent to families with an odd number of children. I counted again. 3 kids. The youngest wailed, a high, piercing sound that cut through the glass. The mother's eyes met mine, pleading, "Please, we've been driving for hours. The baby's sick. We just need a room for the night. Please." My heart twisted. I remembered nights in my own childhood. Sick and scared, my mother's arms the only safe place. I wanted to help. I wanted to believe this was just a family in trouble, nothing more. But the rules had saved me so far, and the memory of the barefoot man, the voices on the phone, the child in the parking lot, they all pressed in, warning me.
The father stepped forward, his voice rough. "We'll take anything. We'll sleep on the floor. Just let us in." The children's faces were pale, eyes too large in the harsh light. The oldest, a girl of maybe 10, stared at me without blinking. The middle child clung to her, silent, while the baby's cries grew louder. I reached for the reservation book, hands shaking. "I'm sorry, we're full," I lied, voice barely above a whisper. The mother's face crumpled. "Please, I'm begging you. We can't drive anymore. The baby, he's burning up." She pressed the child's forehead to the glass, and I saw sweat beading on his skin, his tiny fists beating weakly against her shoulder. Compassion warred with fear. What if this time it was real? What if I turned them away and something terrible happened? I glanced at the rules, the ink smudged from my fingers. Never rent to families with an odd number of children, no exceptions. The father's fist slammed the glass again. "We're not leaving." The oldest girl's eyes never left mine. I felt something shift in the air, a pressure building, the lights flickering overhead. Against every instinct, I reached for a key. "Room 14, I said, sliding it through the slot. "That's all I have left." The family surged inside, the mother sobbing with relief. The children filed past, the baby's cries fading as they disappeared down the hallway. I watched them go, heart pounding, guilt and dread twisting together. I tried to convince myself I'd done the right thing, that the rules were just superstition, that real people mattered more. But as the family reached the end of the hall, the lights above them flickered violently. The oldest girl turned, her face blank, eyes black as oil. The middle child's shadow stretched along the wall, splitting into 2, then 3 writhing shapes that didn't match the children's movements. The baby's cries changed, warbling, echoing, as if coming from a great distance. The mother's head snapped around, her mouth opening too wide, a silent scream stretching her features. The father's body jerked, limbs twisting at impossible angles. The children's faces blurred, features melting and reforming, eyes multiplying, mouths opening and closing in silent, synchronized terror. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. The hallway lights exploded, plunging the corridor into darkness. The family's shapes flickered, then vanished, leaving only the echo of the baby's cry, now distorted and inhuman. I collapsed behind the desk, shaking, the key still clutched in my hand. This was the moment I realized the rules weren't just for me, they were for everyone's safety. I'd broken the barrier, let something in that didn't belong. The motel groaned around me, the walls shuddering as if in pain. The phone rang, shrill and insistent. I stared at it, unable to move. The rules were all that stood between order and chaos, between the world I knew and something far worse. I had failed, and now the consequences were loose in the halls.
Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed. The baby's cry echoed again, joined by a chorus of voices, high and low, pleading and mocking. I pressed my hands to my ears, desperate to block out the sound, but it seeped through, filling every corner of the motel, every corner of my mind. I knew then that survival meant more than just following the rules. It meant never doubting them, never hesitating, no matter how human the danger seemed. Compassion was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not here, not tonight. The motel felt wrong, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The air was thick, humming with a pressure that made my skin crawl. I tried to steady myself, clutching the list of rules like a lifeline. The echoes of the family's cries still lingered, twisting through the empty halls. I wanted to run, to lock myself in the office and wait for dawn, but I knew it wasn't over. The rules had been broken, and something was coming to collect. At 3:59 a.m., the front doors slid open with a hiss. A man stepped inside, tall and thin, dressed in a black suit that seemed to swallow the light. His hair was slicked back, his face pale and sharp, eyes the color of old coins. He moved with a deliberate calm, as if he owned the place. I recognized him from the guest log, a name I'd seen every night, always in room 12, though the room was supposed to be vacant. He smiled, revealing too many teeth. "Good evening," he said, voice smooth as oil. "I believe you have a key for me." He placed a hand on the counter, fingers long and cold. I glanced at the list. Rule number 5, room 12 must remain vacant. If someone asks for it, tell them it's under renovation. Rule number 10, if you find a key on the front desk that you didn't place there, throw it in the dumpster out back, immediately. I looked down. A key sat on the counter, heavy and old, the number 12 etched deep into the brass. I hadn't put it there. My heart was hammering. "I'm sorry, sir," I managed, voice trembling. "Room 12 is closed for repairs." His smile widened. "That's unfortunate. I've been waiting a long time." He leaned closer, his breath cold against my cheek.
Perhaps you'd like to reconsider? The lights flickered, shadows writhing along the walls. I felt the urge to hand him the key, to let him in, to end this night any way I could. But the rules screamed in my mind. I grabbed the key, backing away from the desk. "I can't help you," I said, forcing the words out. "You'll have to leave." He straightened, eyes narrowing. "You broke the rules already. You let them in. Now you want to keep me out?" His voice echoed, layered with something ancient and hungry. The air grew colder, frost creeping across the windows. Suddenly, the manager appeared at my side, her face drawn but determined. She held a battered flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. "Don't listen to him," she hissed. "Get the key outside, now." The man in black turned to her, his smile fading. "You again? Always interfering?" The lights exploded, plunging the lobby into darkness. Shapes moved in the shadows, faces from the family, the barefoot man, the child from the parking lot, all merging and twisting, reaching for me. I bolted for the back door, the key burning in my hand. The hallway stretched, impossibly long, doors slamming open and shut as I ran. The air was thick with whispers, promises, threats. My legs felt heavy, every step a battle. I could hear the man's voice behind me, calm and relentless. "You can't escape. The rules are broken. The door is open." I burst into the night, the cold air shocking my lungs. The dumpster loomed at the edge of the lot, its lid hanging open. I hurled the key inside, slamming the lid shut. The ground trembled, a low roar rising from beneath the earth. The motel's lights flickered back to life, the shadows retreating. I turned to see the man in black standing at the edge of the lot, his form flickering, unraveling. He glared at me, eyes burning. "This isn't over," he whispered, voice echoing in my bones. "There are always more rules.
There are always more doors." The manager appeared beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she said, voice shaking. "You followed the rules. You survived." I looked back at the motel, its windows glowing softly in the pre-dawn light. The air felt lighter, the pressure gone. But I knew it wasn't a victory. It was survival, nothing more. The rules had held, barely, but the cost was written in the empty rooms, the echoes in the halls. I met the manager's eyes, seeing the same exhaustion, the same haunted relief. We walked back inside together, the lobby quiet once more. The list of rules was still in my pocket, heavier than ever. I knew now what they meant, why they mattered. The night was almost over, but the danger would return. The rules were all that stood between us and the darkness, and I would never doubt them again. The first light of dawn crept through the lobby windows, painting the cracked tile in pale gold. The motel was silent, the oppressive weight of the night finally lifting. I stood behind the front desk, hands trembling, the list of rules spread out before me. Every muscle ached, but I was alive. The horrors of the night, the barefoot man, the family, the man in black, felt distant now, like a fever dream. Yet the fear lingered, a shadow that would never quite leave. The manager joined me, her face drawn but calm. She poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one across the counter. "You did well," she said quietly. "Most don't make it through their first real night." I tried to smile, but my lips barely moved. "What is this place?" I asked. "Why the rules? Why all of this?" She looked out the window, watching the sun rise over the empty highway. "This motel sits on a thin place," she said, "a seam between worlds. Most nights, it's just a place for travelers to rest. But sometimes, things slip through, things that don't belong here. The rules keep them out, or at least keep them from spreading. They're not just for you, they're for everyone who passes through." I stared at the list, the ink smudged and worn. "And if we break them?"
She met my eyes, her gaze steady. Then the barrier weakens. The things outside get closer. The world gets a little less safe. She sipped her coffee, her hands steady now. This isn't just a job, it's a responsibility. You're not just a clerk, you're a guardian.
The sun was fully up when the bell above the lobby door jingled. A young man stepped inside, suitcase in hand, eyes wide with uncertainty. I saw myself in him, nervous, hopeful, completely unaware of what the night could bring. The manager nodded at me, and I knew what I had to do. I reached for the list of rules, smoothing the creased paper before handing it over. He glanced at the page, brow furrowing. "Is this for real?" he asked, half laughing. I met his gaze, my voice steady. "Read every word. Follow them, no matter what. Don't ask questions. Just trust me." He shrugged, tucking the list into his pocket, already dismissing it as some strange initiation. I wanted to warn him, to make him understand, but I knew he'd have to learn the way I did, one rule at a time, one night at a time. As I gathered my things, I looked back at the empty lobby, the quiet halls, the sunlight streaming through the windows. I just hope the next clerk listens, because not everyone gets a second chance. Would you survive a night at this motel?